what's and welcome back to the Try Time podcast for episode number 89. I'm Matt.
And I'm Callum.
And today we are joined by a third member on the podcast and the very next in our series of Rugby League guests. We have got Wakefield Trinity's own Cameron Scott with us today.
Cheers, gents. How are you?
Yeah, we're all good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good. Glad to be on.
Good stuff. So, I guess the best way to start is for people who listen who may not know too much about you is taking it back to the start and, you know, what actually got you into rugby league in the first place. Like, would you be able to talk us through that?
Yeah, so I started at Wyke when I was about 8 years old. Spent all the time pretty much following my dad around wherever he was playing, whether it was home or away, and pretty much just ended up being that kid on the side of the field, coated in mud, that just always had a rugby ball in his hands. Kind of picked it up from there. I had one season and wasn't really sure if it was for me. My mum always has good pleasure in telling me, like, I'm wiping the mud off my knees and stuff like that in my first games. But after that first season, like, kind of stuck it out, and I realised my love for it and my enjoyment. So, like I say, obviously, we're going from watching my dad and both my uncles all played in the same team. So it was pretty inevitable I was going to get into it at some point. It was just when, really.
Yeah, and how did it first come about? Obviously, going to Bradford at scholarship level, and how did that sort of happen?
Yeah, so again, another weird one. I didn't really play any high divisions. Obviously played Division 3, Division 4, down at that lower end. And it was just by chance, really, that a scout had rocked up on a weekend. So I'd had trials previously at Bradford before and got let go. Didn't get called back for those trials, which were a bit gutting. But that was just after I'd been diagnosed with diabetes as well. So I was way off in terms of, skill level and physicality. So I kind of took myself away from the sport a little bit and just got back to the enjoyment and finding what I wanted to do with myself, really. And then, like I said, just by the off chance, there was a scout going through White Park at the time when I was playing, and he took some notes down and got in touch a few times later down the line after coming a couple of times, really. And that's where that journey started.
Oh, decent. And what were it like when you actually first sort of walked through the doors at Bradford? How old were you been at that point as well?
Yeah, so I was 14 when I first went at scholarship. Obviously, being a Bradford fan, like my full life, I was really looking forward to it. A bit starstruck, really. I was walking into changing rooms, and it was at the time where the changing rooms were, when the first team had finished, they'd lock all the stuff up, and then we'd use those changing rooms. So it felt like I was rubbing shoulders with people that I'd watch on a weekend. So yeah, that was massive. Obviously, the only thing about all that is that I never actually got to play first team at Bradford. But yeah, walking through the doors, I kind of felt like a bit of an imposter, really. Like I said, obviously I played the lower divisions, and it was all lads from the likes of Stanley and Siddle, East Leeds, Bunslow kind of teams. They were all your top end teams. So for me, walking in, I think they probably thought, what on earth are you doing here? And then I were in the same change room as them, and I kind of thought, yeah, what am I doing here compared to some of these lads? They were playing in title winning teams, and I'd kind of never really experienced anything like that. And it probably took me a while to settle in, actually, to earn the respect of those lads. And I think that was the same with anyone, though, at that age. They were kind of, a lot of people had high opinions of themselves once you made it scholarship, kind of thinking you'd already made it. And when I look back now, that first step at scholarship was genuinely just the first step on the ladder.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I know a couple of the players who will have been in the scholarship system at that sort of time, and I know you've pretty much made it further than all of them anyway, the few that I know anyway. So that's credit to you as well with that. But then, so going through sort of playing scholarship and then obviously the move over to Hull, how did that happen and sort of why did it happen, I guess?
Yeah, so obviously spent 2 years playing at scholarship. So obviously to start with at Bradford, and we were due to play, I think it was Salford, the first game. So it'll have been, February 2015. And that game ended up getting called off due to weather. And we played, I'm sure it was the Midlands 2 weeks later. And basically just said to me, oh, how do you feel about playing centre? And I was like, oh, well, I've never really played centre, never played there at amateur. But I was like, yeah, I wasn't going to turn it down playing that game for Bradford. So I played centre and then kind of had a good game. And that was it from then on, really. I slotted in at the halves every so often. But then I was the first pick centre in my first year scholarship, which, it's quite difficult to do when you look at scholarship teams now. Obviously, it's with it being a 2-year age gap. So I ended up playing all the scholarship games that year, so 8 out of 8. Then went back in at my second year, and that's when things really started to tick. So again, started playing centre there. I think after 2 or 3 games that second year scholarship, I got my England call up for England 16s. So midway through that season, I went over to France, played 2 internationals against France, scored 3 tries in those 2 games. And then when I came back, that was again when it really started ticking off. So the academy deals were rolling around. I had quite a lot of offers having played for England and scoring a fair few tries as well in those 2 games. So I had a lot to consider between those options, and there were some big clubs in there. Like I had offers Salford, Wigan, Warrington, Huddersfield, Hull KR, and then obviously Bradford as well. And anyway, ended up signing the deal at Bradford. I just felt like being closer to home and being around everything, that was going to help. So if I'd have gone to some of those other big clubs, it'd have meant living with a family out there, or travelling to even get there, which at 16 years old was it was going to be too much of a strain, and I didn't want my rugby to pay for that. And then on the back of that, it was like schooling as well. So we staying at Bradford, they allowed me to stay on at my 6th form and start my A levels. So yeah, I signed that deal. And that was a 2-year deal at academy, with the option of a 3rd. And then we're 4 weeks into pre-season training. If that, I just started doing a bit with the first team as well, just after coming back from Christmas. So I was part-time in the first team and doing academy as well. And then that's when the liquidation started, and that fell off massively. It went from literally being in liquidation and being told it'll be fine to lads coming and picking assets out of the training ground and putting them in the back of the cars and driving off. And obviously that turned into a full liquidation. So at that point, I had a few offers again from other clubs that had left their interest there just in case anything had gone wrong. So it was a bit inevitable really, because a few people understood that it was going under. Probably 2 weeks before that, I had a phone call. Well, Jamie Peacock rang my dad, and he was head of rugby at the time at Hull KR, and he kind of said, "Oh, if anything goes wrong, there's a contract there for him." And my dad sat me down and said, like, it's a bit weird that this has happened. It kind of felt like something was coming. And then obviously the liquidation happened, and the guys who took over at Bradford just didn't fill me with confidence when we had a massive meeting with all the playing staff and all the coaches. And so I just decided that, my time was probably elsewhere.
And obviously you made that decision then to choose Hull FC at that point. Particularly ironic, I guess, given Jamie had spoken to your dad being obviously at KR at the time. I guess even more ironic, debuting for FC against KR. I mean, how was that of all the games to step into to make your, I guess, Super League debut?
Yeah, so obviously, so to start, Jamie Peacock rang up, and I was going over to meet Tim Sheens and Jamie Peacock at the same time, with all intentions basically that I was going to sign my contract. And the day before, Hull FC rang up, rang my agent. So with us being in Hull, we saw them both on the same day. So I went to Hull KR first, met with them in the morning, and then went to Hull FC in the afternoon. And Hull FC put a full-time contract in front of me with the idea of playing reserves, obviously full-time. And it being a good wage to start with. But the big thing that attracted me there was obviously going full-time straight away. I've not had that at Bradford, and I knew that was my foot in the door. So anyway, I'd gone to Hull KR expecting to sign a contract, and basically said, yeah, we'll go away and think about it. And then literally hours later, signing a deal at Hull FC as soon as it was put on the table, pretty much. So yeah, and then obviously it comes full circle, probably a year later, 16 months later, the Magic Weekend. Again, that was one that came out of nowhere. Obviously, we played 2 weeks before against Featherstone in the Challenge Cup, and we'd had a few injuries and suspensions, and then we played that game, and then we had more. I think we lost 4 players to injury, or 2 players to injury, and then 3 to a suspension. So that game came out of nowhere for me as well. I remember Radders pulling me in the office and kind of being like, "Are you going to play this weekend?" And I'm thinking, "Oh God, this has come a bit quick actually." And then thinking, it's KR Magic Weekend. I'm like, there's only really 2 bigger games. You've got a grand final and a Challenge Cup final that are probably bigger than that. I remember it being, obviously, I think a split crowd of about 30,000+ as well. And obviously KR turned up thinking that they were going to run us ragged. Obviously Kurt Yeaman came out of retirement in that game as well to play for us. So there were all these overriding emotions. There were 3 of us on debut. Sorry, myself, Liam Harrison, Hakeem Maloudi, and then Kirk Yeaman out of retirement. In aspects that were kind of set up for us to win. Obviously our backs were against the wall, and KR thought they were going to romp it. And obviously we turned up with a bit of a scratch side and got a result. So like I say, with it being, probably one of the 3 biggest games you can play in a calendar season, and to make my debut, it was a bit ridiculous really, but I wouldn't change that for the world now.
And obviously that's such a great high point. Like you say, one of the biggest games of the season, I guess, in rugby as a whole, debuting there. Was it a bit difficult in that case to, I guess, go back to being the backup choice almost, and out on dual reg and loans throughout like 2019, 2020?
See, the thing is, looking back at it now, I thought I was ready at 18, and I was so wrong. I think if you ask anybody who's playing at the top level now, you're not ready at 18. Like, you might be ready for a couple of games here and there, but even then, that's max. I look back now and you're genuinely just a child. I remember playing that game and struggling. I played against Junior Vai, and Radders had told me about him all week, and we got to the game and I knew what was coming, and he still made it hard work for me. And I was just thinking, there's a lot of improvement in me before I get to where I want to be. So again, going on loan and dual reg, I think it probably made the way I got to where I was. I had to do it the hard way. Obviously, you look at some players that I've played with, and they've kind of, once they've got into the first team, they've not come out of it. Whereas I was probably the other way. I got into the first team and then was in and out of it, and had to go find my own form and what I was good at, and gain a bit of confidence really, after playing a few tough games those first couple of years. But like I said, that probably made me in the end. Spent half a season on loan at York in 2019. That's probably where I found what I was good at, and James Ford really got the best out of me after having him at England. And then obviously I went to Lee in 2020 when I was supposed to be going back to York. Again, that stopped down to COVID, but started the season on fire. I was playing on the wing there. So the first 4 games, I think I'd scored 6 tries in the championship, something daft like that, and we were really flying. That's when we were top of the table. And then obviously COVID hits, and that was my opportunity back into Hull really. So there were restrictions around people playing with COVID tests and things like that. And obviously I'd played well at Lee. Went back to Hull when Andy Loss was in charge. He took me back and kind of said, look, now's your opportunity to put your best foot forward. So again, massively helped, down to the COVID rules. People could be in and out, or you could have a test on a Monday and could find out the results on a Wednesday, and then half your team could be missing. So, that was unpredictable, but that's where I got my first opportunities. And then rolling into 2021, that's where, Brett Hodgson kind of took me under his wing, and that's probably the year I'd like to say I started making a name for myself, really.
I mean, you've dropped a few different coaches' names in there, and this is probably going to be the first one that puts you on the spot a little bit. Out of all, then, if you could say you had to go play under one of those coaches for the remainder of your career, who would you have picked, and I guess why?
So I'll give it. So Radders would be an honourable mention. I got on really well with Radders, but again at the time, I was probably too young to understand him, as how he acted and how he was around players and what he did to get the most out of players. So for me, being 18, I was probably quite intimidated by him, if I'm honest. It was hard to feel like you were always doing the right thing. He was such a perfectionist, and that's probably why he got the best out of some of the teams he did. And I always felt like I was always getting my legs blown off, but he was generally just trying to make me better. I think now if I had him as a coach, it'd be totally different. I'd probably understand it a much better way. But if it was any, probably Andy Last. Obviously, last year had a few head coach roles. He's just gone back to Hull now, but one of the straight down the line coaches, as passionate of a man as you can meet. Just an intelligent rugby coach, always good with the fine details, always good with man management. The respect he demanded from that playing group when he took over was absolutely ridiculous, and that probably turned us around a corner. Again, another one though kind of pulled me in and out of the side, but for very good reason. Every time I played, I felt like I improved under Lasty, and it was just honestly just one of the smartest, most intelligent blokes you can meet, just with passion rivaled, and he really got the respect out of the players.
I guess I touched on the other one you mentioned there at Hull FC, and that was Brett Hodgson, which I think obviously you say took you under his wing quite a lot. Unfortunately, it didn't really seem to, I guess, work out longer term for Brett at Hull FC. I guess, is there anything behind the scenes perhaps that suggests why things didn't work out for him at Hull at least?
I think, the big thing with Hull FC is in the consistency. And again, that probably happened under Hodjo. The first 2 seasons, or the 2 seasons he was there, the first probably 10, 12 games, we were flying. Everyone had his tips as top 4. And we ourselves believed that. And then it kind of hit that point where, injuries and suspensions had come through and we'd start to struggle. And that's where it really caught up with us. And we always tended to fall off a cliff towards the back end of the year. There's a lot of things that could be put down to. Again, we've seen that over the last couple of years under different coaches. So again, I can't say it wasn't so much about coaching, but probably a combination of a few things as well.
No, that's fair enough. And I guess consistency is a key word. And whilst we won't dwell too much on the season just gone, I think it's fair to say that in the Hull FC camp, it probably wasn't where anyone in the club wanted it to be. I guess to the extent that you saw while you were there, how are things going at the club? Do you feel like that there's definitely turning a corner under the new ownership and they've got the right people in to help the club grow?
Again, there's not too much I can comment on now. Obviously, I've probably been out of there for the best part of 5 months. Obviously, being at Wakefield for that long.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty out of the picture now. I speak to a few of the lads that are still there and still very good mates. Like I say, I don't know much about the owners. I don't know how much they're actually going to put into it or anything like that. I think it's probably what it needed. I think the club needed a bit of a freshen up. We got that when we moved facilities to the uni, but again, even that had its drawbacks. We moved there and our players' room and things like that weren't ready. But like I say, we needed that freshen up to get out of County Road, our old training ground. That kind of got labelled the doom and gloom place kind of vibe. It were painted dark on the inside, and the only time you ever got there when it was dark on a morning, it was wet and it was raining and the ground were heavy. So again, moving to the uni was part of that reason. It needed a freshen up. But then on the flip side, things weren't ready. So you're going from having, your lunches based off the university lunch sat with students because the players space isn't ready. So as much as it was needed, it still probably was a bit rushed. But like I say, obviously with these new owners taking over, hopefully they can put some money in the right place and really start to turn a corner. I think for me, like I say, as long as I'm in a different camp now, so it's totally different to look at it from the outside. But from the inside, I think that's probably what it needs.
Yeah, and how did, obviously, like you say, 5 months ago, obviously you moved over to Wakefield. How did that deal come about with going to Wakefield, and how did it all go?
Yes, obviously, I tore my hamstring at Hull, and that was a bit of a nightmare, really, the way that was handled. So I just came to an agreement with Hull, with obviously my deal already been signed at Wakefield for 2025 anyway. It just meant I didn't have to travel over. I was renting a house over there as well with a few of the lads. So I said, if they were to pay me out and kind of release me, that meant I could go see my own physio in my own time. I could do my own work away from a club. It meant there was no pressure from a club I wasn't taking any time away from any other players that needed, physio treatment as well. And then it also meant that whoever I was working with, I could go 1-to-1 and in depth with, which I did. So I teamed up with Paul Hatton, who was our strength and conditioner at Hull for a good few years when I first went there, and he looked after me for probably the best part of 6-7 years. So I always got on really well with him. And I still keep in contact with him now to this day with different programs and different ideas. And the previous physio as well, Chris John. So they worked together running out of Hatto's gym. So it just meant like I could get some really good in-depth one-to-one work, one-to-one programming, and just looked after really. Obviously, I knew when going to Wakefield that I'd have to hit the ground running when it finally came to it. So I worked for about 8 weeks with them, 6 to 8 weeks with them. Just basically hitting all the right markers and making sure that it was healed, and I was doing the right testing on force plates and moving well again. And basically Wakefield just rang up and said, well, it had gone past the August 2nd deadline anyway. They just rang up and said, do you want to come in early and get around the boys? And I said, well, yeah, it was good. Obviously, I've been training on my own for probably 6 and 8 weeks, and kind of does get a little bit tedious after so long. So I jumped at the opportunity to get back and get around the changing room, and I think it's what I needed. So for that run into the end of the season, I was working with the physios every day. I had no pressure to get back on the field, knowing I couldn't play. It was just about doing everything right off of it. So in the gym, all my rehab, I'd got loads of load into it through running and loads of high speed as well. So it was exactly what it needed, really. Don't get me wrong, I was like really frustrated that I'd not played again in 2024. But I think with it being the bigger picture, it's put me in a really good position for when we start 2025.
And what's the Wakefield camp like at the minute? Obviously, a great season in Championship, winning the grand final, A grade IMG. What's it? What's the mood like?
As you can imagine, absolutely bouncing. You look at some of the players they've signed as well. It's just unbelievable. The last time I played at Wakefield, that stand was half built, and people were complaining about how bad it was. An absolute credit to Matt when he's taken over and put his money into it, and really done what's needed. But like I say, the vibe's massive. Obviously, the Championship campaign they had was absolutely ridiculous. I think people thought they'd compete in that league, but probably not take it on as well as they did. You look at that final against Toulouse, and it was just chalk and cheese in a comparison between two full-time teams, really. But then obviously you look at the investment in the playing squad added to some of the quality they've already got, which is massive. And then like the facilities as well, some of the plans that are coming through to do extra bits with it on top of how it already looks. That would probably the attraction for me is, it's a place with massive ambition, and everything's being put in place to make sure that can be met.
So was it a bit of a no-brainer then for you when Wakefield came knocking, or was there anyone else in the pitch that you were kind of debating between?
So yeah, I'd heard obviously all the positive things at Wakefield, and it came to contract negotiations. I'd been sent an offer from Wakefield really early. I've known Steve Mills, who's head of recruitment, for quite a while. And to be fair, Wakefield sent me an offer through, and I said I'm going to see what Hull come back with first, because obviously I've been there that full time, and I've been there a long time, and I could see myself like moving up through that club quite well, and the opportunity had opened itself up. So I was in discussions with Hull over a new contract, and that turned into a bit of hard work. It kind of went a bit stale on the negotiations, and basically they told me that they didn't think I was worth what they were willing to spend, or what I wanted. So in the end, I just ended up ringing Wakefield and signing the deal within about 10 minutes of ending the phone call with Hull. I just wanted to give Hull kind of the opportunity first, and for myself, the fact that I'd been there for so long, that it could continue. But I felt I was probably ready for a change as well. Obviously, I've been there 8 years by the time I'd finished, and obviously travelling for best part of 7 of those years, and then I moved over for the last year. Kind of made me realise that I think the opportunity I wanted was to be closer to home and where I'm from. And obviously with Wakefield cropping up and with all the positivity around their place, it was pretty tough to turn down, really.
And what's the ambition in that squad for next season then? Is it a consolidation year in mind, or is this big push they want playoffs for 25?
Well, this is the thing. So it's kind of been touched upon. I don't think no one's put any markers on, this is definitely what I want to do. This is what I want to achieve, kind of thing. Well, I think we're quite happy just sat under the radar a little bit. Obviously, everyone's seen the quality that's been signed, but it's also a big player turnover. So that'll get discussed in pre-season as well when it comes down to goals and things like that. So we're not back in for just over a week yet. So like I say, all that's yet to come. But there's a quiet confidence around the place, and it's not as if people are running to the hills with all these ideas. And whenever anyone's asked me about what the goals are, we've not actually put any markers on it, like I say. But there's a massive confidence around the place that we can really push this year.
And what about you personally? What sort of like personal goals or things are you wanting to achieve with Wakefield?
For me, I'm 25 now, so I've played 7 years at the top level really since I debuted, and I've not really played in many finals. So for me, it's to play in those big games, whether that's playoff games, cup finals, grand finals, or end of season playoffs. But all that comes with me being on the field as well. Obviously, I've had a tough run this year with a big injury. And every time I hit form, I seem to hit a little bump in the road when it comes to an injury. So for me, if I can do a full year and get into some of those big games, whether it be finals or semi-finals and big playoff games, just to be able to get in those games and have the chance of a massive outcome and a bit of a celebration with a big win.
I think the good thing as well for you will probably be being joined again on probably the third time you've been at the same club as Truman now. Obviously, I imagine at this time you've formed quite a close bond. So what's it like playing with someone who you've known from such a young age and very similar, like you say, in terms of background and coming through the ranks?
Yeah, well, obviously, so we've played against each other as juniors when I played at Queensbury, and he played for West Bowling. So that went on from probably being 11 years old. Then we ended up playing together at scholarship, obviously through 15 and 16. He stayed a bit longer at Bradford, an extra year. And then, he made his name for himself when he debuted at Cass, and that's probably the longest time we'd gone without playing with each other, was that time when he was at Cass and I was at Hull, until obviously he came over. But yeah, it helps. We've pretty much had the same journey to get into where we are now. We've both had, some injury troubles, but albeit his have probably been a bit bigger than mine. But again, he's one of my good mates and one that I'll always call a good mate. Get along really well with him. We all know similar people, so we're never too far away from each other, really. But his rugby CV speaks for itself. He's one of the most naturally gifted players I've ever played with. He really makes the game look easy. And again, he's one of the most laid-back blokes you've ever met as well. He just does everything just so relaxed, so calm. Everything's just so natural. But when you've got to be player to make it look easy for yourself as well.
And I guess that's playing with your mates, but obviously, as you know in Super League, you've seen it at Hull. It isn't just the local boys that get the chance, and we see some big names coming in from, well, both domestically and overseas. Has there ever been anyone that you've played with where you've really felt a little bit starstruck and actually pinch yourself that you're sharing a field with them?
I remember watching the 2016 Challenge Cup final, and obviously this even signed an academy deal. Mahe Fanua was absolutely clinical in that game. It was so it kind of went from watching him on TV carved up and pretty much in a grand final, final. And then you've got the inspiration, obviously, in his 50-second tackle. And it was just big plays on the big stage. And, I was sat there watching it on TV thinking, I'd love to be able to do something like that one day and make that big play. And a year later, even not, that was, sharing a changing room with them. I remember being sat there. The rugby journey really comes at you quickly. I've gone from watching these blokes on TV to rubbing shoulders with them and training every day. So if I went from those ones, it'd probably be, Maher Fanua being one, because I just remember, him just being an absolute freak in his top form. The speed he used to run into contact and winning play the balls, and then with his second tackle that will go down in the club's history forever.
I guess then just go back to something that you mentioned at the very top of this, and I guess what has affected rugby, but also more widely. You mentioned that you obviously got diagnosed with diabetes and how that impacted your very early trials at Bradford. Is that something that you feel has led to you having to train differently and have different precautions throughout your whole career? I guess even now, as a fully professional player, as well as in those early years.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'd love to be able to say it doesn't affect me or unfortunately it does. I'm just constant the best. Go to and if they've not been in a good spot, that can affect my games. Through a hot part of the year, it was Huddersfield last year, played them away, and they've been quite high all day, which then just meant I'd been going to the toilet quite a lot, so it flushed everything that I put into my body out of it. And I remember getting cramp probably 35 minutes into the game, and I knew that once I got that time in the game, I was like, I'm not going to make it through this game. I'm not going to get to the full 80. So yeah, there's loads of different things to think about when it comes like that. So being type 1 diabetic affects your VO2 max as well. So your oxygen production from your heart to your muscles can have a pretty 500, that could be somebody 80. So again, there's things of everything on top of it rather than kind of fall away behind. But again, it comes down to diet, to training, even to sleep. And I've had 2 paramedics at the bottom of my bed just because they've dropped that low in the night. So it's the unpredictability really, and it's World Diabetes Day actually. A massive thing's been made about the stigma, about how a lot of people don't fully understand it, or see it as a disability but don't want to understand it. And I think that's a massive thing in the sport. Everyone kind of goes, oh yeah, he's a type 1 diabetic, but nobody really understands what that means or what that means for me, or even sometimes staff and coaches what it means to them, around my training and around things like that. I think sometimes it seems like it's just a bit of a cop-out, but it's hard to explain if people don't understand or don't want to understand as well.
And I guess you touch on diet and training there. I guess to anyone aspiring rugby players or anything in the future that might somehow stumble across this, God knows when, if they're also, like you say, type 1 diabetic like yourself, what would you say the best advice is for them that it doesn't hold them back and limit their careers?
I'd say you've just got to embrace it. There was a time where I felt sorry for myself, but also, it's not going away anytime soon. You've just got to embrace it and find what works for you. And that's the biggest thing. Every individual's different. So for me, compared to some other people who play different sports, it's all different and it's all individual. So for me, I'd say, yeah, you've just got to embrace it and find what works for you, and don't let it be a limiting factor. I think that's what I've always tried to do, is not use it as an excuse, but kind of use it as a reason to kick on and find a way to do what I want to do without it being a limiting factor.
No, definitely. It's great that you can raise awareness for that as well, because like you say, not everyone would know that that's kind of a thing that you go through, and it's definitely good. The more awareness we get out there, the better. So now I wanted to ask you about, obviously you've started your coaching business, I guess. Like how did that come about, and what's that like, and what's your goals with that in the future as well?
Yeah, so obviously I coached open age at Wyke. That was my first kind of coaching thing I did. I was 19 and I was looking after the second team. And then obviously, I think that first year we finished third in something daft like Division 7. And then the first team coach left during COVID and they asked me to step up. So I took over the first team then. And we just moved into a higher division. And I think we finished fourth that year as well. But like anything, you know, with summer rugby and amateur, it tends to get pretty difficult. You know, people are on holiday and can't commit. And you kind of see, I saw a loss in training numbers and the time. Second coaching it. That was 2021, and that 2022 I just this operation and set up their new clubhouse and facilities that had supposed to have been built for years. They finally opened it. So, and Greg Worthington was coach at the time. He do an extra pair of hands on. He said, whilst you're injured, away from constant rehab for. I jumped in on that. Halifax as well. It ended up that I just ended up taking over from Greg. And that was when they were in the Premier Division, and we finished fourth in the Premier Division that year in 2022. And then retired. So then Greg stepped down. You know, quite late into the years. We dropped down a couple of divisions and we lost to Wipsy in a playoff semi-final in 2023. So, you know, I had another couple of good years at Queensbury, and then obviously moved the start. I was looking to get back in somewhere, but the amateur game is struggling. On that one-to-one goalkeeper coach, and he set his up, and I've been watching what he'd been doing and kind of space through it. He'll come get a full hour with me to kind of improve, and then I'll tailor a plan and try that goal. But like I say, one-to-one, it gives that time of loads of why we're doing certain things, and I'll try explain why everything's been done. So, and that pressure of having to put a team together on the week, you know, I'm hoping that from the
I think it's just come back up, mate. I think it just had cut your internet connection or something had cut out then because it had completely gone off, gone blank. That last couple of minutes.
We had some of the famous Yorkshire internet when you get a bit rural there.
Yeah. It seems to be back now though. We can
Rugby league heartlands for you, isn't it? But
yeah, it is.
But no, we did catch most of it, to be fair. But yeah, it's definitely true about the amateur game and the way it's hard to get people participating and things like that. But no, it's really interesting going down the one-to-one coaching route and sort of how different is that than doing teams? How different in terms of how it stimulates you as a coach?
Yeah, so like I said, obviously we're doing teams. It tended to be open age. They were always the teams that I'd done. So you kind of got some players that are all at different levels. When you coach open age, you've got some people who are naturally gifted and kind of pick things up in no time, and then you've got others that might be there because the mates are there, or might just play to fill a shirt on a weekend, just in case you're short. So you can't coach everyone to the same level. You've kind of got to coach a way to get everyone playing in the same way, if that makes sense, into a system. Whereas when it comes to one-to-one, it's always the basics, the skill aspect of everything. So if any of those people that are coached one-to-one, the chances are they're all going to play in different systems at different ages. So I'm not going to teach them how to do it a certain way from a system point of view. I'll teach them the ways behind skill-based things and the ways you should do things in certain scenarios, because that's when you're going to get tested when it comes to a game or in a team situation. So like I said, it gives you that time. Having the explain why we're doing certain things or why this is going to work better than something else, and how you should adapt it when it comes to playing in your teams.
So I guess then just to carry on looking, I think, a bit further, but obviously your focus will very much be on next season in Wakefield. I guess by the time, obviously we're talking many years into the future, you're looking towards the tail end. What's your ultimate aspiration to achieve before you retire in rugby league?
Sorry, mate, I lost you again then.
No, I think we're having some connection there. I was just saying, obviously for you, a long way off, but still, of course. But before you retire from rugby, what is it that you really dream of being able to achieve with your career?
I think for me, I'd like to win something. Obviously, I mentioned earlier about I've not played in too many massive games, and if I went all the way through my career without winning something, I'd probably be proud of the career I've had, but also not in the same aspect. I feel like a Challenge Cup or a Grand Final would be massive. I'd really love to win something like that and get that experience. Obviously, I'd also love to play for England. That'd be massive. I think putting some form together is the start of getting onto that journey, which would really help. But like I say, I've probably got best part of 9 or 10 years left yet, and my drive and getting up every day is still the fact that hopefully come the end of the season I can walk away with a medal around my neck.
And this is one I'm going to rat Callum out for saying before you joined the call and we press record today. Is there any chance that you are seen back at Bradford in the famous white, amber, black and gold that you done back in the scholarship era?
Well, obviously I touched on it at the start. That obviously I never played a first team game for Bradford. Like obviously with the IMG coming in now is great, and you just don't know what's going to happen with clubs. Obviously it's still my boyhood club, so I'd love to pull a shirt on for them, in Super League, or even just to make that opportunity that I've played for my hometown club. It would be massive for me. Like I say, I don't know how the roller coaster is going to go, and I don't think Bradford fans know how that's going to end up, whether they get promoted or not in the next couple of years. It's something never right. Play for teams, so it's still on my agenda somewhere.
Yeah, good. Hopefully that can happen then at some point. That'd be good, even if it's just
Fingers crossed.
a 1-game loan or something when you're coming back from injury or something like that. It'd be good.
Stop wishing injury on the guests, for God's sake.
Yeah.
But now, have you got anything else that you want to ask, Matt, or anything you're curious about?
I mean, I think we've covered, pretty much start to finish career and I guess hopefully the future there. So, thanks again for coming on. It's been absolutely great to speak to you, and probably our only wish was we had better internet, but
yeah, hopefully next time we'll get you on, we'll try and do in person or something like that maybe, and then
I guess we'll have to drag the old studio back out, won't we?
Yeah.
But no, thank you again, Cam, and thank you everyone that has tuned in and watched this. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and stick around, subscribe, because I'm very much hoping this won't be the last of these guest pods we've got coming up. With hopefully, if all things go to plan, at least a couple more before the start of the new season.
Yeah, definitely. So thanks for listening.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us, and until then, goodbye.
See ya.